Joining us now from Washington, D.C., Congressman Robert Hurt, Republican 5th District. Congressman Hurt, good to have you with us, sir.
Good morning, John. Looking forward to next Tuesday night. We're going to be tuning in down in Southside, Virginia. Going to listen to your program.
No, we're going to be fired up, and we always have the best analysis. You know that. There's some hot races going on, so we're going to be covering it too. So I got a couple of upset predictions that I'll be sharing in my show today. One of them, District 16. This thing's got upset written all over it. Anyway, Congressman Hurt, let's get to the Patriot Act expired. You got the Freedom Act now passed big in the House. How do you stand on it? What do you think we ought to do?
Well, you know, I guess the one should begin by saying that we as members of Congress have our highest obligation, that is to obviously uphold the Constitution, and at the same time we have to defend this nation, and that's a solemn responsibility each of us takes. I believe that the American or the USA Freedom Act that we adopted on May 13th is absolutely constitutional and guarantees those constitutional rights afforded every citizen. I also believe that it at the same time draws the right balance in terms of giving our intelligence officials the very critical information that they need to be able to track terrorists and stop them cold. And I think that it is regrettable that the Senate has failed to act in a responsible way. They should have taken up our bill 3 weeks ago. This reminds me a little bit of what it was like dealing with the former majority leader. This should have been disposed of weeks ago, and we could have avoided all of this. It is obviously not an easy issue, but one that I believe is really, really important that we get right, and I believe that the House-passed bill strikes that right balance. So
you believe, Congressman, that the Freedom Act is an appropriate compromise, if I understand what you're saying?
I do. I mean, obviously, there were concerns about the Patriot Act, and I think that this goes a long way towards addressing them in as it relates to accountability and transparency. And I think it's important for your listeners to remember, if they don't know this, that what the information that is sought here is, number one, it's not information that is possessed by any individual. Of course, these are phone records that the phone companies keep, or the large majority of these records are phone records that these companies keep, and they keep them for the ostensibly for the purpose of the business relationship established between the customer and the phone company.
Right.
And it's important also to know this, that when those records are searched in the metadata form, at least certainly under the Patriot Act, the only thing that was discoverable was the number called, the number that originated the call, the duration of the call, and the time of the call. Those four things. That's it. Absolutely no content whatsoever, no names whatsoever. It was simply a method by which you could take a known terrorist and then scrub across these records that the phone companies kept on of phone calls and be able to hide, find possible matches. I believe that based on the things that I've learned in classified settings as well as unclassified settings, that this was a useful tool. It's not the only tool, but it was certainly it has been a useful tool in putting together terrorist networks that we have to remember. We live in a very, very dangerous world, and it's only getting more dangerous when we look at a lot of the positions that this country's taken. So that's my position. I know that there's a variance of opinion on it, but I do believe that the Senate needs to act on something this week, and hopefully try to restore the program and restore, I think, people's faith in our ability to defend ourselves.
So the bottom line with the Freedom Act, the automatic sending of phone records from the phone companies to the government, stop that, stays with the phone companies. really, just to be honest, no different than the old mob cell days before cell phones and internet calls and stuff, where you would get a phone bill at the end of the month, 90 pages if you made a lot of phone calls with every call you made, everyone that came in, what the time was. Yep. So they're going to maintain it.
But it's important to know you would not have any idea who the numbers belong to, because there are no names in it. Just to be clear.
Right. And
the other thing I would point out, and I should have said, in the earlier scheme, the way it would work is that if you wanted to get behind any of that information, you would have to go to a court. You'd have to go to the FISA court and get a warrant based on probable cause, which is the exact same amount of evidence that would be required if a police officer wanted to search a person's home or arrest a person. It's the same level of evidence. It's called probable cause. And so now the way it would work, the difference between the two is now the companies will keep those records, and then the government, if they want to get to those records, will have to make some showing to the court to get into them. So it won't be an automatic, as you say, it will not be an automatic dumping of records into the government database. It will, and the government won't control it. It'll be controlled by the private sector, who already has the records, by the way.
Right.
It's just a matter of going through the extra steps. So, and that I think ameliorated a lot of the concerns of folks about the civil liberties. And I think it's also important to point out that our constitutional framework sets sort of a threshold. There's nothing to say that Congress can't provide more protection for civil liberties other than what the Constitution requires. I believe the Patriot Act was constitutional. I believe this is constitutional. That is to say that it protects individual rights in a very fundamental way. But it also, but it goes above and beyond that, and that's a very important and proper policy decision for Congress to make, especially when you consider the fact that when our Constitution was adopted back in the 1780s. And the Bill of Rights was adopted in 1790s. I don't think our founders had any concept of. There was no way they had any concept of the kind of technology that we're dealing with today. They certainly got the principle right, and it's our job to try to live up to that principle.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, now though, a FISA court judge would have to sign something specifically to turn the records over, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that's the bottom line.
And then there are some other things, other protections. There is and this is something that the Senate is trying to water down, by the way. But there are protections that relate to the transparency that court rulings will now be more easily made public, unless there's some compelling reason not to. Before, a lot of those records of decisions were not made public, and I think a lot of us believe that you need to have the sunshine. Even if it's not real time, you don't want to jeopardize an ongoing investigation. But at the end of the day, whoever's making those decisions needs to know in their mind that the decision is going to be looked at in the light of the public light of day. And I think that's really important. There are also some other provisions that relate to sort of how the FISA court can receive amicus briefs to supplement their decision making, and that those briefs would be filed by people who are specifically appointed with the idea that we're looking out for privacy rights.
Oh, well, that seems to be, look, in the environment we're in, two sides, different positions, it seems to be a reasonable, viable compromise to me. I would be in favor of just letting the whole thing expire, but I can certainly see the argument the other side. 21 past the hour, we're with Republican Congressman Southside's 5th District of Virginia, Robert Hurt. Congressman, I got to get to the Fast Track Trade, TPA, one of these other acronyms, if you will, might be the biggest battle in 2015 that Congress has. How do you stand on it, and where do you think it is now?
Well, I think trade is extremely important. I think we need to look for ways to make sure that our farmers, and we have a lot of them in the 5th District, who are seeing more and more success in exporting their products. Literally, hundreds of millions of dollars in commodities that get exported out of Virginia. And I think that we need to look for opportunities to grow that trade. Our manufacturers depend on trade. If you look at the 300 plus million people that live in the United States, and you consider how many people live outside of the United States, it seems to me that by opening up new trade with new partners can be a win-win-win if it's done correctly, and that's the big if. It is a benefit not just to, right now, big business, if you're a multinational corporation, trade's not an issue because you can locate wherever you want to sell your product. If you're a small business or a medium-sized business, a manufacturing business or an agricultural entity, these trade deals can be very, very important because they reduce barriers that otherwise wouldn't be available. I think that especially with the Trans-Pacific Partnership that the president has been negotiating, and by the way, he doesn't need our permission. He doesn't need permission from anybody to negotiate these trade deals. He's doing it. He has done it. And he doesn't need Congress's authority to be able to do it. He does need Congress's authority to seal the deal, but he doesn't need anybody's authority to begin the process. And so that is, I think there is some real opportunity there if you look at the Pacific Rim, all of the countries that surround the United States is obviously a part of that. You look at all of those nations that surround, there's about 10 of them that we would like to have more trade with. For instance, Japan, very difficult for us to get any of our agricultural exports into Japan. Wouldn't it be nice to work out a deal where they would lower the barriers into their markets and offer a place to sell more soybeans, right? That has two benefits. One is to our businesses, big and small, but it also has another benefit, and that is if you think about the relationship that China has to those countries, and you think about the fact that China wants very desperately to get into those markets and to control those markets, if the United States doesn't look for opportunities to get into those markets and compete with China, then what China will do is they will negotiate agreements on their terms, and they will dominate on their terms, which will not be the same standards that we would require if we enter into if we're enter into a trade deal with those countries. And I think there's a real opportunity there when you think about the growing influence of China in the region. We see what's going on in the South China Sea, for instance. There's a very real benefit that could accrue, I think, under those circumstances. Now, with all that said, you're asking about the Trade Promotion Authority. I've heard a lot of people say, well, we can't give the president, this president, because he's so lawless, this authority. Well, he is lawless, and he has acted lawless, and I don't trust him. But by giving a trade promotion authority to the president, whoever it is, I think if it's done correctly, and I think that the Trade Promotion Authority bill that I have looked at does this in a judicious way. It gives him authority to close the deal and then submits to Congress on an up or down vote whether to support the deal. So we may be giving him power to negotiate, but we're not giving him power to do the deal unless we say so. And I think that the Republicans will be in control whenever any future votes on trade under this president comes due, and we'll be able to put our final fingerprint on it or our final approval on it. And I think and then it goes beyond that. There are two other things that are new in this Trade Promotion Authority that have not been in earlier what they call Fast Track Authority. Mm-hmm. We list 150 requirements that we direct the president to negotiate over. Not only do we do that, but then we also have more control than under any previous Fast Track Authority to be a part of the negotiations during the process. And then finally, there's an off switch. If the president starts starts getting into areas that we think, like immigration, for instance, that we don't agree with, we can always turn the switch off. And I think if you look at how the president has totally lost, his party is totally fractured about this, I think that it shows that the Republicans, in sort of an unusual way, since I've been up here, the Republicans actually have a really good hand to play and actually have control over a situation, whereas I feel like heretofore so often the president is the one who ends up with the winning hand. And so if you look at how badly the Democrats are fractured, I do think that there's a real opportunity for us to really seriously control this, because his party doesn't have his back on this. So I think it does give us real power, and if we don't like what he comes up with, we kill it. It's as simple as that. And so I guess so I'm inclined, John, to support the Trade Promotion Authority. I haven't made a final decision, but that's sort of where I am. Sort of laid it out, the reasons that I think it is important to give him that authority to kind of close these deals and then present them to Congress for approval. I haven't decided on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is the actual trade deal, which again has been negotiated in a lot of ways, but is also still out there and won't be finally negotiated for the next year or so. I haven't decided about that. I'm looking, as you know, a lot of this is not made public, but I'm able to look at these deals, especially from an agricultural and from a manufacturing standpoint, because it's really, really important to me that we, if we're going to do something like that, that we don't kill American manufacturing. Previous deals have not treated American manufacturers well, and so I'm not going to vote for anything that I think could hurt American manufacturers.
NAFTA, in my judgment, there's a lot of data out there, but NAFTA cost the United States about 14 million manufacturing jobs. So I was not in favor of that, as you know. So we've only got 15 seconds, Congress, but it sounds like we've got your commitment that even if you vote in favor of fast-track authority, you're going to take a hard, long look at the actual Trans-Pacific Partnership deal, and if it's not to your liking, you're going to
vote against
it down, right?
I'll vote against it. I mean, and listen, just I know we don't have a lot of time, but let me just say this real quick. I come from an area that, those 14 million jobs you're talking about, a lot of them were in Southside Virginia,
that's right.
and that's something that we have lived through for the last 20 years, and so I take that very, very seriously. My constituents are very concerned about it, but I think my constituents also recognize that there could be some opportunity if you work out a deal that raises other countries to our standards, as opposed to doing what NAFTA did, in my opinion, and that is lower our standards to the the standards of other countries, and that's what I think happened.
All right,
and that's
Congressman,
where we got our
want to thank you for being with us. We're out of time. For more info, go to hurt.house.gov.